We acknowledge the First Peoples and their traditional lands referred to as Treaty 6, 7, and 8 territories, and that the province of Alberta and all the people here are beneficiaries of these peace and friendship treaties. Treaties 6, 7, and 8, along with small areas of Treaties 4 and 10, encompass the traditional territories of numerous Western Canadian First Nations as well as the Métis people. Norquest College is dedicated to ensuring that the spirit of these treaties is honored and respected. Heeding the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, with funding from Alberta Advanced Education, the Rural Roots program is herein responding to the calls for education for reconciliation. Article 62, 2. To post-secondary institutions to educate teachers on how to integrate Indigenous knowledge and teaching into classrooms. Article 63, 2. Sharing information and best practices on teaching curriculum related to residential schools and Aboriginal history. Article 63, 3. Building student capacity for intercultural understanding, empathy, and mutual respect. Article 63, 4. Identifying teacher training needs relating to the above. We are grateful to the elders who, with open hearts, willingly shared the knowledge they keep for their peoples. On behalf of English language learners throughout the province of Alberta, we thank them for introducing newcomers among us to truth about identity, treaty, protocol and ceremony, residential schools, challenges to overcome, and guiding lights.
I think we're the most misunderstood people in Canada. Not just the education system, it's the movies, It's the books, everything. So if you're a newcomer to Canada, you're walking down the street, you saw an Indigenous person. Don't paint them with all one brush. We are different. Best way is to stop them, say, hello, how are you? Try to understand which nation he's from, who he is. They'll be so grateful that they'll explain who they are. Then the newcomer will begin to understand we're all different. Well, my name is Hayden Mountingtown. I come from the Siksika Nation. Siksika Nation is part of the Treaty 7 in southern Alberta. Siksika people, their territory is the North Saskatchewan River, all the way down to the Yellow River is the Montana, and part of Saskatchewan, and along the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. That is Siksika territory, Blackfoot territory. Sometimes I don't like the word First Nation, Aboriginal, but most of all, I like to be called a Siksikaquan. That's who I am, where I'm from. The very, very important thing is that you have to have a foundation of who you are. Those foundations are your language, who you are, your spirituality, and your emotional value. You got to know where you're from, who your parents are, what is your nation made out of. It gives you strength. Once you have that solid foundation, then you can build anything you want on it. And that's what we're doing for our children. And they're very active little people.
Kanawakbit is high. Gina Ilvit, that's who are you? Carol Ovayuak Tuktuyak Tokmon. I'm from the Northwest Territories. Our regions are called Inuvialuit Mon. Inuvialuit means the people from the land. Inuvialuit. We're all Canadians. Inuvialuit are from the western region, the Beaufort Ocean and the Mackenzie Delta. And the Inuit are from the east. They're Nunavut. Northwest Territories is the west. We're still all together, Inuvialuit and Inuit descendants. Friendly, nice people who live off the land. We speak the same language. Siglit and Delta. We have 4 seasons: winter, spring, summer, and fall. And we live off the land about 8 months of the winter. Summertime, we get that 24-hour sunlight. Back home, we don't see the sun go down. It's right, we could see it right at the tip of the ocean. Long, cold winters, we prepare like when people go hunting. They get beaver, muskrat, wolf, wolverine, all that. We hunt back home for the fur and to make things, to sew. To sew, we make parka, shoes, mitts, hats, mucklucks, to keep us warm. Something different, it's the snow, the rain, the land. Because back home, where I'm from, Tuktoyaktuk, there's no trees. And there's the ocean. And there's a pingus. And there's rivers and creeks and hills, beautiful land. Where I come from, we're on the shores of the Beaufort Ocean. And now it's have changed a lot since global warming and climate change. So the land is disappearing.
You got to understand the area of the people. Even though we have brown skin and we may have a braid, we have a culture that the language could be different. The teachings could be different. We have medicine wheels that could identify who we are as people. Well, if I look at my childhood, when I was growing up, I was labeled an Indian. Like at Canada Place, for example. If you go in there, it still says Indian Affairs. You look at the Indian Act, it still says Indians on it. Mm-hmm. You take out your treaty card, what does it say on there? Indian. We were always labeled as Indians, and that's because one particular person came across the big waters and thought he was at India. That's how we got that name Indian. Government wants to call us Indigenous, wants to call us Aboriginals, all these different names. We refer to ourselves as Nihio. I would refer myself to as Nihio. I wouldn't even call myself Cree. Cree is an English word that came from the government people. To identify who you really are, The old grandmothers had a saying. She would say, "Where's your belly button from?" And I can't even say the English term of that cord. It's got a... Yeah, that one. The grandmothers, we call them kokums. The new parent would take that cord and they would make an amulet, a little pouch, and they would give that grandmother a protocol, tobacco and a gift, and say, "Pray for my child. But when you pray for my child, this is where we're from, and this is what I want my child to be when they grow up." It's like a promise. It's like a commitment. So the elders, the grandmothers, would do that ceremony, and they would pray. The old people speak Nihio, the Cree language. My generation, and a lot of them can speak it. The younger people don't speak the language. The reason our young people don't speak it today, the government decided they were going to civilize us. And how they did that was through residential school. They were not allowed to speak their language. But when I went to public school, I was not allowed to speak my language. If we did, we got punished. The biggest part of identity is the language. When you don't have your full language, it's hard to understand the true meaning of the spirit of that language, the spirit of those people.
Métis, its meaning is of mixed blood. We are Indigenous people, but have a European background also. Métis come from the word from Michif, which describes their language and the way the people lived at that time, which was the early mid-1700s, late 1600s, the Métis people started evolving in Canada. It's French. A lot of Métis at that time were either French, Scottish, English, or Irish. But it's more French. French was a dominant language in early Canada. Métis sash. It was worn for celebration use. The Métis men wore the red, and the Métis women wore blue. But it was used for a tool. It was also a tool for carrying things, tying, in emergency uses. The Métis looked good with it. And they also wore high leather boots. The hats were used for water, feed their animals, and to have drinks in the streams, protect them from the sun. The Métis, they were always independent people. They governed themselves. They established communities. They identified themselves as unique. I have an Alberta, Métis Nation of Alberta card that recognizes me as a Métis citizen of the province of Alberta. We are still part of what's Rupert's Land identity, and which makes us a true Métis Nation within the borders of Canada. We have the right to meet, to have elections, to be recognized as an Indigenous group, land claims. We have hunting rights in the province of Alberta. We have hunting and gathering now in the province of Alberta, which is unique. The rest of the provinces are still working on that. Métis and First Nations, we have a unique relationship. Our families are intertwined. We have a long history together here in Canada. We walk side by side.
like people have said to me, you don't look Native, or you don't look Indigenous or Aboriginal. I know right away to ask them, what do you picture an Indigenous person to look like? When you think poverty, when you think unemployed, children in care, people in jail, who comes to mind? The white person? No. Indigenous men, unemployed, poverty, on the street. Women, Indigenous women, on the street. Uneducated, children taken away. People say, I'm not racist. Of course you're racist. And the healthcare system is racist, education system is racist, and so is the justice system. That is why it's so important to have the TRC, because that's what it's fighting against. My mother was born just off the reserve in Sandy Bay, where I'm from, in 1907. And then her mother, my grandmother, my kokum, passed away when she was about between 3 weeks and 6 weeks old. We're not quite sure. So what happened is she was given to the community. The nearest community was by reserve for women to nurse her because she wasn't going to survive otherwise. So she was raised on the reserve as a community child. And as she got older, she was registered and she was given a family. Richard was their last name, and they kept her. And then she went to residential school. So my mother was not Indigenous at all. My father, on the other hand, was the eldest, and he never went to school. My Mishum said, no, we'll lose everything we have if this child goes to school. Christian school, they called it. So his grandparents kept him. And nobody ever came looking for them. And now I know that we have to be twice as good, twice as educated to get ahead until we can have everybody in a circle that's equal.